because she loves Nottingham. But Melanie was born in 1970 in Derby. Melanie was adopted at a very young age, and I'm sorry to tell you that she was sexually abused. She was then put with foster carers who sexually abused her again. She had a very rough, difficult childhood. At 15 years of age, Melanie was said to be quite a difficult person to handle, and one can understand why. Melanie was then put at 15 into the Beechwood Children's Home in Nottingham. And it was there that Melanie has never ever changed her story, that not only was she sexually abused, but she witnessed the sexual abuse and the torture of many children there, and also the murder of a child or children. And Melanie Shaw has always insisted that she can take you to the grounds and show you where that child or children were actually buried. And it's very interesting that eventually Beechwood House was closed down, and it was immediately bought by someone on Nottingham Council. They immediately purchased the building and the extensive grounds, and very quickly they had the whole lot fenced off with very high fencing, and it is thought it was done to stop people getting into the grounds and trying to dig up bodies that were alleged to be there. There is something else I want to say about my talks. Melanie's had a rough life. And I promise you, in any talk about Melanie, I will never swear and I will never blaspheme, but on the other hand, I am not doing Melanie Shaw or you any favours if I sugarcoat what happened to Melanie. I'm here to tell you the truth and to give you the details, which are sometimes very unpleasant. Now, Melanie finally left Beechwood in 1986. She was 16 years of age. She'd had no upbringing to speak of and not a fabulous education. She had no support whatsoever from social services in Nottingham or anyone. It is not surprising that Melanie fell very quickly with nowhere to live and no money. Melanie fell into a life of drugs and prostitution. I'm sorry, but she did. After a while, Melanie met a much older man with money. He was comfortably off. His name was Derek. He was a good bit older than her, and he took care of Melanie very well. They were together for 13 years, and they had a son. And that son now is about 20 years of age. I'm not going to identify him, but that is what happened. Melanie Shaw didn't need to work when she was with Derek because he gave her a good life, but Melanie did do voluntary work, and it's very interesting that for a while she was the volunteer researcher to the Nottingham MP, Chris Leslie. There are photographs of them in a work-type capacity that you can see online, and I'm afraid Chris Leslie often says, oh yes, he supports Melanie, but the moment that Melanie was put into prison, he lost all interest, and he's never been near her since. After a while, Derek, being a good bit older, Derek suddenly died one day. They weren't married, and Melanie was suddenly left to bring up her son on her own, and her son would have been about 11 years of age at the time. After a while, Melanie felt that the time had come to blow the whistle on what she saw and experienced at Beechwood Children's Home. And she set about walking the streets with a megaphone, not unlike ours today. She literally walked the streets telling people about what she'd been through and what other people had been through at Beechwood. And that is a video that you will find on UK Column. If you look for it, there is plenty there for about Melanie Shaw on UK Column. Now, eventually, the police got to hear about Melanie whistleblowing, and the Nottingham police were forced or pressurised to start an investigation. And they called that investigation Operation Daybreak. It dragged on for 4 years, and frankly, I think it should have been called Operation Farce or Operation Dog's Breakfast, because that's exactly what it was. While the investigation was going on, Melanie caught the police out with many lies and many mistakes. And I think I can give you all a bit of a giggle, and I'm afraid make the most of it, because it is the only giggle there is in Melanie Shaw's life. At one stage, Melanie was told that someone had just made a police witness statement for Operation Daybreak. And Melanie thought, hang on, just a minute, I think that person is dead, and they died a couple of years ago. And Melanie, being the very determined type that she is, Melanie actually went on a tour of graveyards and cemeteries, and Melanie actually found the grave with the gravestone of the person who the week previously was supposed to have made that police witness statement. So therefore, Melanie was able to show the police up, the Nottingham police up, for exactly what they were, which was cheats and liars and frauds. That is what Nottingham police are all about. They're about lying. Now, I'm afraid everything we do, there's a comeback. Every cause has an effect. And Melanie, showing the police up as fools and liars, the comeback was that they paid Melanie back with a couple of years of constant harassment. They felt that they had to let Melanie know who was the boss, them, not Melanie. And they used to follow Melanie, trawl alongside her in cars when she was walking in the street. They once raided her house for absolutely no reason except to upset her, and they also used to ring her any time of the day and night for absolutely no reason, again, just to upset her. They also, the biggest, most damning thing they ever did to Melanie was they took her son from her. And I have never ever been able to find online, on social media, or anything that anyone has sent me, anything about Melanie neglecting her son so that social services would have a good reason to take her son from her. It is widely believed that the child was taken from her simply to upset her. Now, the next thing that happened to Melanie was that she was very suddenly arrested and put straight into what I can only describe as the hellhole that they call Sodexo Private Prison in Peterborough. Melanie was taken straight to Peterborough, and she was charged with having set fire to a garden shed in the middle of the night. And this fire was supposed to be so terrible, the life of an entire family were put in jeopardy. Well, I have to tell you that that arson and that shed fire was an absolute stitch-up. She was also charged with reckless damage, which was throwing paint at the side of somebody's house. Now let me get rid of this pot of paint first. Melanie's fingerprints were found on the pot of paint. So therefore, that was good enough for the jury to decide that she was guilty on the paint pot charge. what they took no notice of was the fact that there were 9 other sets of fingerprints on that tin of paint. But why would you want to blame 9 other people when you can blame Melanie Shaw? The name of the game was to discredit Melanie and completely rubbish her name and her character. Now then, I want to tell you a little bit about UK Column, who are a news programme. They've interviewed Melanie and they've put reams of information about her, so it would be a good idea if everyone looked that up on UK Column. Now, Mr. Brian Gerrish, who runs UK Column, he went to the arson case and he rang Nottingham Fire Brigade and asked for details of the call out to this fire. There was bound to have been a call out because the fire was said to be so bad that the lives of a whole family were put at risk. And Brian Gerrish, who runs UK Column, was told that Nottingham Fire Brigade had absolutely no record at all of any call out to a shed fire at that address on that date. So what you can take from that is that if a fire was started, it wasn't much of a fire. And I am rather cross that one man online said that he was in the area, he woke up at night, heard a noise, he said he looked out of his bedroom window and saw the shed ablaze, and he said to his wife, quickly, ring the fire brigade. Well, it's very strange that the fire brigade have no record of that call out. The judge, Judge Michael Pert, I think that he could see that there were holes left, right and centre in this case. It just didn't add up. But the jury brought in a unanimous verdict of guilty. And Judge Michael Pert could have sent Melanie to prison for arson because arson is a prison offence. But he didn't send Melanie to prison because he said he felt that she was mentally ill. And he gave her a 3-year community order. And I'm going to leave it there and have a drink of water. So Melanie didn't have to go to prison. She was free for 3 years, provided she behaved herself. Well, Melanie had a very difficult life. Nothing ever went easy for Melanie, and I'm afraid she did breach the community order. She went through a red traffic light. She was found at one stage not to have any tax on her car. And there was another strange incident that no one has ever really got to the bottom of, where Melanie was ill and had to call for an ambulance or a paramedic. The paramedic turned up and Melanie felt that she wasn't getting the service that she was entitled to. And it was rather a silly thing to do, but Melanie became very upset and she locked the paramedic in her house and refused to let him go. I mean, he did get out eventually, but they called it false imprisonment, and that's why Melanie went straight back to Sodexo prison in Nottingham. And in the next talk, I'll talk a little bit more about Sodexo. But at the moment, I want, if John, please, could film this. John, can you just get the camera on that, love?
Look at this. Have a look at this, what they did to her legs, please.
Have you got that, John?
That's what they did to Melanie.
This is what they've done to Melanie's leg in the past. Look at the state of that.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah.
Can this leave? Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have got printed posters of this disgusting, don't lose it. This disgusting leg ulcer that Melanie Shaw came by. And I have to tell you that Sodexo prison refused her all medical treatment. They refused to call in a doctor and they refused to send her to hospital. And when she finally left Sodexo in Peterborough, she was on crutches. And the other thing I want to say is that it is thought in modern times that Manuka honey is the latest thing for boils and sores. Melanie was sent Manuka honey for the leg ulcers, and Peterborough prison still refused to give it to her. So Melanie finally came out of Peterborough prison. By this time, Melanie was really in dire straits. She came out of Sodexo, Peterborough. She continued to be harassed by the police. And another interesting thing, in Sodexo, she was entitled to receive housing benefit. The Sodexo staff refused to get her forms to fill in, so that eventually the place where she was living was simply taken off her and she was tipped out into the streets again. No one ever seems to have helped Melanie Shaw. Now, it's not surprising that after all this harassment, Melanie decided to get out of Nottingham and go down to Plymouth. And I think that she went down there to see her friend, an advisor, that's Brian Gerrish, who runs the UK column. And there are a lot of holes in this story, but it is known that Melanie did take the train from Nottingham to Plymouth, so she must have had the money to do that. She must have had a purse on her, and she had a mobile at the time. And I think that someone saw her getting on the train bound for Plymouth, or perhaps the Plymouth connection, because in the evening that Melanie got into Plymouth, she was arrested by the Devon and Cornwall police for absolutely no reason. So it looks as though Devon and Cornwall police were tipped off, look for Melanie Shaw, she's coming on the train. It wouldn't have been too difficult to find her. And Charles Cross Police Station put her in custody that evening, and she was let out at 3 o'clock the following morning in the driving rain, no raincoat, no purse, no money, and no mobile. So what happened to the purse and the mobile that she went there with? Now, the police probably felt that she was going to see Brian Gerrish, and Brian was in his office at 7 o'clock in the morning with another member of staff preparing for the 1 o'clock news. And at 7:30, the police bashed the door in and raided his office looking for Melanie Shaw. Well, of course, they wasted their time because she wasn't there. We don't know where she went and what she did after that, but as Plymouth had done a little in the way of favours, she made her way back to Nottingham. And we then turned the corner into 2016, and the very, very beginning of January 2016, Melanie was forced to attend a secret trial. This secret trial was arranged or ordered by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. It is also known that Theresa May has destroyed many, many files concerned with child sex abuse. Melanie is only part of it. And we know that some of the details of the secret trial because Melanie contacted Brian Gerrish and he gave those details out on one of his news programs. Melanie said that she was shown into a little room with no windows, and the trial was to take place by video link. And Melanie stared into a camera and she was asked questions and answered them. And when she started to talk about some famous names in Westminster and Nottingham who had interfered with her and other children, a voice said, "Melanie, you're shouting. We're cutting you off." And Melanie was then taken out of that room, and 6 months later she started her sentence. The sentence was, for the case, 2 years in prison. But because it was a secret trial, we don't know what the charges were, and we don't know what the verdict was. There was no verdict. Melanie was simply told, "We're cutting you off, you're shouting." So that will tell you something about secret trials in this country. Secret trials are perfectly legal, and it seems pretty obvious to me that secret trials are brought in and made legal whenever it suits the government and when they want to do something that they don't want you to know about. The first prison that Melanie was sent to was New Hall Prison in Foston Hall in Derby. And that's where I caught up with Melanie and where I started writing to her. I've had 11 letters altogether, and after Foston Hall, she went into Wakefield, which was an absolutely dreadful place that I'm going to tell you about in the next talk. Then she went to Eastwood Park, and then finally to the hellhole that I call HMP Style in Wilmslow, Cheshire. Now, Melanie was sentenced to 2 years, so we all knew that Melanie's release date should have been the 2nd of June last year. And some of us felt she was not going to be released. The last letter that I had from Melanie was dated the 10th of May last year. And I've never had another letter from her. Very distressing, but there it is. Now, 4 days after Melanie wrote to me, she was forced again to attend what I can only describe as a series of bogus, cooked-up Leeds Crown Court cases. She was accused of setting fire to her cell a few times in Foston Hall. And on the one occasion, she admitted, yes, she had done it. Melanie vaped when she was allowed to. She didn't smoke tobacco, she vaped. Now, I'm very angry that Melanie was given access to matches and a lighter anywhere after the Nottingham Crown Court arson trial she went to, where she was found guilty. What on earth were the Foston Hall staff doing, giving her access to matches and a lighter? And it seems that they were almost making it easy for her to start a fire, simply so that her name could once more be discredited. I can't really blame any of the staff involved, because I feel that they would have been given orders from higher up. These cooked up court cases that Melanie was meant to attend, a few times I rang Leeds Crown Court and I was told she's turning up today, and sometimes I was told no, she won't be turning up. Now, the important thing is this. There was also charges of sexual assault, that she had sexually assaulted staff at Style. But later those charges were dropped. So it's very odd that they were got up in the first place. The important date you want to remember, the important week, is in the 2nd to the 7th of August last year. There's another Shaw involved in this, and that was Professor Jennifer Shaw. Professor Officer Jennifer Shaw was asked to assess Melanie as to her suitability to attend court physically and mentally. And on the 2nd of August, Melanie Shaw was considered fit mentally and physically to attend court on the 7th. But I'm afraid on the 7th, it was a different story. Melanie was brought into court. People were shocked, rigid at the state of her. Her arm and hand were heavily bandaged, and Melanie seemed to be incoherent, rambling, and deranged. What I want to know is what happened to Melanie in the 5 days between being declared fit and healthy and on the 7th turning up a deranged, incoherent mental wreck and bandaged. And I've always said that Style Prison have a lot of answering to do. The judge at the time, I think that was Judge Michael Phillips, said there was no point in going on with the case because Melanie didn't seem to know where she was and why she was there. And he abandoned the case and he sent her back to Style for more mental assessments. So things dragged on. Style really played a very dirty trick on Melanie and on me. The year before, in 17, Melanie wrote to me and said that she was cold in her cell and please would I send her a warm jumper for Christmas. This I did, and all I can say is thank God for the Royal Mail tracking service. It's a wonderful thing and it'll save you bacon every time. By the February, Melanie still hadn't written to thank me for the jumper. She never acknowledged it. So I wrote to her and said, well, I did send you a jumper. I took the matter up with Style, and would you believe Style Prison actually wrote to me and said we never received the jumper. We never received her Christmas parcel. So they were then given the name of the HMP Style officer called Ashton, who signed for the parcel at 10 to 10 the day after I posted it. So like the Nottingham police, they were left looking rather silly. Eventually they said that they had located the jumper and they weren't going to give it to Melanie because Melanie had the required number of outfits. It does rather make Melanie sound as though she's a model or some sort of a debutante. They were going to keep the jumper and it would be given to Melanie on her release. After that, we realized that there was going to have to be a sentencing trial for all these silly, cooked up, bogus court cases, and the important date I want to give you is the 2nd of April this year. That was Melanie's sentencing trial. I rang Leeds and they said no, she was excused being attended due to ill health. So that means that she was probably mentally wrecked and in no fit state to come to court. What's behind all this is that we believe that in the 5 days between being declared mentally fit and being seen deranged, we believe that Melanie was forcibly drugged to give the impression of mental illness. That would then make it easy for a psychiatrist or psychiatrists to section her. There was method behind all this madness. The government always intended that they were going to silence Melanie Shaw forever. And one of the judges, that was Judge Penelope Belcher, did say at one of these court cases she'd heard that Melanie was going to be sectioned at some time. And we, the general public, were never ever allowed to know the actual date that Melanie was transferred from Style to Rampton, but that happened behind our backs. So I'll end now by saying that with regard to the 2nd of April sentencing trial, Ben here has managed to obtain at high cost a transcript of the court case. And he's going to tell you all about Melanie's bent barrister. You wouldn't think that barristers would be bent, but this one was. His name was Mohammed Rafiq, and he was bribed to do a deliberately bad job of defending Melanie, and some people even say he did a better job for the prosecution than he did for the defense. Melanie is now definitely in Rampton. I did a talk outside Rampton on the 1st of May, and I took the chief executive of Rampton, Mr. Peter Wright. I took him to task over the fact that Melanie wasn't writing out, and we believed that she was being prevented from writing out. And oddly enough, on the 9th of May, 8 days later, Melanie wrote out the first letter she had written out in exactly 12 months. And it's because it was exactly 12 months later, after my letter on the 10th of May, 18, and Melanie writes out on the 9th of May, 19, that is a hell of a coincidence. So it's felt that Melanie was told to do it because the chief executive had been given a public rap over the knuckles. Right, I'm going to finish now, ladies and gentlemen. I'll say thanks very much for listening, and you've got a treat in store. We're having a break for about 10 minutes, and then listen carefully to what Ben has to say about the court transcript, because it's going to be a real eye-opener. We are privileged to know about this court transcript. All right, thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Well done.
Come on.